Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So here I have another inks comparison video, and this is red inks comparison number 7. So I think with that, let's go and swap up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me. When I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over, I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here and I will rinse the nib off several times and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink here on this ink comparison video is Monteverde and its Strawberry Shortcake. So I think let's go and do an ink swatch here. And this is a very bright red, and this is a red that I have actually liked using a lot. I actually bought the Monteverde ink set, the Sweet Life set, and I actually bought another couple of bottles of this ink because I really like it. So we'll do a double pass over the top half here just to show the difference between a wet and a dry, or a broad and a narrow writing nib. So this is Monteverde. And it is Strawberry. And it is Shortcake. But this is a really beautiful, I'd say almost a passion red, a very bright, vibrant red. Although when it dries, it does look a little bit more on the pastel side. The next ink here is, again, another Monteverde ink, and this is a Cherry Danish, which is an interesting red ink. So I think let's do another ink swatch here. And I say that this is an interesting red ink because it's definitely different to what I normally expect a red to be when it goes on wet. We'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or a broad and a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Monteverde. And it is Cherry Danish. And like I said, it is an interesting colour, red. typically I actually associate cherries as being more of a darker, brighter, sort of midpoint red. So this is actually an interesting colour for sure. The next ink here is Diamine, and it is the Gibson Les Paul guitar series of inks, and it is Cherry Sunburst. So we'll do an ink swatch here, and I am actually including this because of the name Cherry. But as you can see here, it is a little bit more, I would say, on the brownish side of red. There is some hints of red in there. I'm just going on the top half here, doing a double pass between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Diamine. And it is Cherry Sunburst. And it is certainly lightening up on a little bit more of a brownish red, I would say. So I still think it's classified as a red, but it's certainly nothing like Monteverde Strawberry Shortcake. The next ink here is Diamine Passion Red. Now let's do an ink swatch, and you can see that if you think Monteverde Strawberry Shortcake is a bit of a passion red, then this certainly is more of a passion red. We'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or a broad and a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Diamine. And it is Passion Red, which is a very nice, very passion bright red. It's not a dull red. It does actually dry, I believe, a little bit more on the pastel side. A little bit like Monteverde Strawberry Shortcake, although I would say that's a little bit more of an orangey red. And then the last ink here on this comparison today is Diamine Writer's Blood. So we'll do an ink swatch here. Now, this is supposed to be a red ink, and it kind of is a red ink. It's a little bit more of a darker blue, sort of black red, I would say. A little bit more of a midnight red, perhaps. We'll do a second pass over the top half to show the difference between a wet or a broad and a dry or a narrow writing nib. So this is Diamine. And it is Writer's Blood. And you can actually see that this actually ink does go on quite wet and also quite broad as well. So I'd have to say this kind of actually reminds me a little bit more of blood. So I think let's take a look at these inks now that they have dried. So we have Monteverde Strawberry Shortcake, and this is a really beautiful bright red ink. It's got, I'd say, more of an orangey red to it. So if you are liking light reds or orangey reds, then maybe you might like this one a little bit more. So can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? Yes, you definitely can there. Is there any shading going on? Yes, there is a little bit in the pulled area. I'd say maybe not a huge amount there, but there is. Is there any sheen going on? There's definitely a little bit of sheen around the edges there, but there really isn't a huge amount of sheen. I've seen some gold sheen on red inks, and I'm not seeing that here. The next ink here is Monteverde Cherry Danish, and you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. Is there any shading going on? Definitely there is some shading around the pulled areas for sure. Is there any sheen? Now, I would say yes, there is. There's definitely some sheen around the edges here. There is also some more darker red here, which definitely to me looks more of a sheen. It's just trying to to break out. So for me, I would say yes, there is some sheen there to Monteverde Cherry Danish. Just not a huge amount that you're going to notice a lot of gold sheen. The next ink here is Diamine, and this is Cherry Sunburst. Now, a lot of people would say, yes, this is a red ink, and a lot of people would say, no, it's a brown ink. I think it's a little bit in between. The wording here on the ink name is definitely cherry, so I'm including it here as well. You could maybe say it's a little bit more of a terracotta colour, I guess. So can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? Yes, you definitely can. Can you see shading going on? There's definitely shading there in that pooled area. And can you see any sheen? There's definitely some sheen around the edges here of the ink, but maybe a little bit in the center there as well. Again, it's a difficult sheen to see, so it's not like a in-your-face gold sheen that is going to pop out at you. But I do like the color of the writing sample there. That's very, very nice. The next ink here is Diamine Passion Red, and again, you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. Now, this Passion Red is a little bit more on, as I said before, on the passion or the pastel side. It's not an orange coloured red, whereas Monteverde Strawberry Shortcake, I would say, is. This is more of maybe a pinkish red, more passionish, I guess. But you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. There's definitely some shading going on in the pooled areas as well. Is there any sheen? Let's take a look. There's a little bit around the edges here, but very, very difficult to see. So I would say a slight amount of sheen, but it's really not a lot to really speak out about. And then the last thing here is Diamine Writer's Blood, and you can see it really did go on thick. So this, it didn't feel very viscousy when I was doing the ink swatch, but certainly when writing with a nib, it was very viscousy. So you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. There's a little bit of shading going on in the pooled area. Is there any sheen? Let's take a look. I would say no, there isn't. It looks like it wants to sheen, but it just isn't possible to sheen. So I'd say that that's really not a sheening ink. So there you have it. That's my red inks comparison number 7 video. If there are any of these inks you like, let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other inks that you would like me to compare, then do let me know in the comments below. So that's my red inks comparison number 7 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.